Welcome to Parapsychology Today, a program of investigation into the realms of the unknown. Suspend your mind for a moment and journey to a world beyond the five senses. Parapsychology Today is a program exploring ideas, theories, and concepts that have been around since ancient times. We'll journey to outer worlds and inner worlds. We'll look into such phenomena as past lives, UFOs, and hauntings. And we'll explore psychic ability as it relates to human potential. We do not intend to prove or persuade, but rather present theories and personal stories of ventures into the world of parapsychology. Whatever your beliefs, we hope this program will start you thinking about a reality beyond the five senses. Ever since men and women first looked up in the sky and saw objects, there has been a fascination with UFOs, and that interest continues today. We see it on television in such programs as the miniseries Intruders, and in movies such as Close Encounters of the Third Kind, E.T., and most recently Fire in the Sky. And we read about it in books and in articles, such as this recent article in Parade, Oregonian's paper by Carl Sagan. Hi, I'm your host, Pauline Nortness. Welcome to this second edition of Parapsychology Today. As you might have guessed, we're going to explore the phenomena of UFOs. We'll be talking with 7 people about this topic, and we'll also take questions from our studio audience. First, let's meet our guests. First person here on my right is Shar Elliott. Shar is the director of the Northwest UFO Group, or NUFOG. Next to Shar is Keith Rowell. He is assistant director of the Northwest UFO Group. Next to Keith is James Kenny. James is a licensed professional counselor and hypnotherapist. Next to James is Irene Ray. Irene says she's had UFO experiences, including abductions. And next to Irene is Steve Frost. Steve also says he has had experiences with abductions. We'll also talk with 2 other guests who believe they've been abducted and have had unusual experiences. They prefer at this time They prefer to remain anonymous. We'll hear from them during the program, and I'll refer to them as Kay and John. Let's begin this discussion of UFOs with, let's begin with Keith. Keith, could you give us a definition of UFO?
Sure. It's, as you might imagine, it's pretty hard to define, and UFO researchers have worked for 40 years or so to try to define what UFO means, and what they've come up with is that since we don't have what artifacts in the public domain, what we have is UFO reports. And UFO researchers have taken UFO reports and investigated them to the best of their ability. And it turns out that the best publicly available studies have shown that about 10% of all UFOs that are reported turn out to be prosaic things like stars, like planets, sometimes birds, sometimes aircraft, and so forth. However, about 10% or so turn out to be very hard to identify. In fact, they can't really be identified. And this forms what UFO researchers call a genuine UFO. And it's my belief that probably a large percentage of this 10%, let's say 8% or something like that of the total, is really a flying saucer. And there's a popular conception of that as a aerial craft that seems to be intelligently guided. That's pretty much what UFO researchers believe today. And that came out, I think, that result in the 50s, so it's been with us for quite a while.
Well, there's so much to discuss on this topic, and we only have approximately an hour. So what I'd like to cover in this discussion period is some personal stories from our 4 guests. We'd like to talk about some different theories regarding UFOs. And I'd also like to talk about some support groups, which Shar can direct for us. And I'd like to, the 4th thing is government role in this area, so we should probably get moving right along. So what I want to start now with is some personal stories about UFOs, and I'll start with Irene. Irene, could you briefly describe your first experience with UFOs and anything that you feel relevant to this topic?
One of the first memories I have of in my entire life is an entity that I called the boogeyman when I was a child. And my first memory is of this little gray being at the end of my bed. and I was absolutely screamingly terrified by this entity, and it showed up a lot. I don't remember trying to explain it to my parents. I don't think they would have understood if I did. Then when I was about 12 years old, both my mom and I saw a UFO, and 3 of them, as a matter of fact, who hovered over our pasture and shot off in different directions, and we talk about it to this day. So it's very comforting to know that there's someone else that was with me. It wasn't just something in my imagination. And then many times over the years, I've had strange experiences in the middle of the night with beings coming into my room and being transported to places that I have called the control room and the red room and different things like that. It wasn't until 1987 when the Omni article came out that the concept of UFO abduction occurred to me. I had no idea. I just thought strange things happened to me.
Did you discuss them with your mother, who had seen the UFOs with you?
Not really, not really. We, of course, it became family history, family story, the night Mom and Irene saw the UFO. But it never went beyond that, because I actually, to this day, did not make the emotional connection between what I saw in the sky and the rooms I end up in the middle of the night.
Do you know for sure these rooms aren't a dream, that you're having a vivid dream?
They're a darn vivid dream. They're a darn vivid dream. Quite honestly, I don't believe or disbelieve that they are any particular thing. All I can really do is report what I've seen, what I felt, how I feel the day after. Quite frankly, I've never had another kind of dream that leaves me with a hangover. So, which these particular...
Do you have any other physical manifestations the next morning?
I have a scar on my arm that it's hard to see now without a suntan. When I get a good suntan, you can see it. And right now I have a round circle on my leg that showed up. And it showed up as a burned blister type thing. And now it's just kind of faded into a scar.
Keith, some of the things Irene has been talking about, are these some typical things of people that have claimed to have been abducted or had some experiences?
Right. There are... I think it's important for us to understand that there are physical signs, physical evidence, and some of it is the scars, small scoop marks, sometimes small, inch-long incision sorts of things. Things like, let's see, there are sometimes also stains that are picked up seemingly after the person has had the experience.
What do you mean by stains?
Well, we're not sure really what the origin of them is, but when a person either has the memories themselves or usually hypnotically enhanced, they feel that they have a memory that some sort of substance was used, and maybe it was sloppily used during the time that they were being examined. And
you mean like when you put your
forth.
finger, the stain, like when you go into a place and they want to stamp you for something?
Yes, something like that. And then when they come back, the stain is found on the clothes. So there are some kind of, you can think of as low-grade physical evidence. It's not, I guess, probative, if that's the right word, of that this actually really happened. The story really comes together when you consider everything.
Everything. So you can't prove an individual case, but when you have it over and over again, you feel that
That's
something's happening. Has anything happened that has hurt you? Do you feel these beings are hostile, or are they benevolent?
I'm clueless about their intent. I've had both feelings before. I've been extremely traumatized by the whole phenomena, and if there's any one thing I would want to get across, it's that people who are out there now who might be experiencing something like that, you're not alone. And I wake up in the morning after these things, I feel like I've been beat up. I'll walk into the office and someone will ask me, "Oh, how are you?" And I'm glazed over, I'm fogged over, I'm aching.
Does this continue today? Is it still happening? You said it started in childhood.
Nothing's happened for probably about 2 or 3 months.
Is there a cycle to this? Like, does it happen, or
There seems to be. There's lulls. The lulls tend to be 6 to 8, 10 months, something like that.
Can you tell when it's going to happen again?
Sometimes I'll be laying in bed and I just get the feeling. I don't know quite how to describe it, but I just get this feeling like it's going to be a long night.
Have you gone to seek any help to help you deal with this?
I've been in a support group.
Okay, we're going to get to support groups in a little bit. We'll talk about that and how it's helped you. Have you ever been regressed back to deal with?
No.
Okay, we'll get to that with Jim in just a minute. Let's go to Steve and hear a little bit about your experiences, Steve.
Well, you know, I guess one of the things that people are trying to come to grips with is, you know, is this real? And I guess I qualify virtually anything I say by reality is subjective. And, you know, as Irene was saying, all I can do is report my perceptions. My perceptions are that ever since I was quite young, I've had experiences that up until fairly recently, in the last 3 years or so, I've attributed to being dreams. And the dreams included being carried away from my room by entities. You know, often were the short, large-headed, big-eyed people with some pretty dazzling technology that for a kid it was, you know, it's like, oh, look, they're magic, you know, and that happened a lot. And then one day, approximately 5 years ago, I awoke from a, quote, dream that was the most terrifying thing I'd ever experienced. And to make a long story short, it went through a series of events and ended up in such a way that I had been constrained to the top of a table. I had, through some surgical process, they severed my skull, opened up they took the top of my head off and were performing some kind of operation on my brain.
And you could witness this?
In fact, I had left my body and I was watching the whole thing from directly above my body. That was how I witnessed it. And there was 2 people kind of doing the operation themselves, and then, you know, and people is a fairly loose term here, and then another half a dozen or 8 other beings that were observing the whole thing. And I was very distraught by the whole thing. And again, to encapsulate, I ended up getting back into my body, and at the same moment that I slammed back into my body in that reality, that dream state, if you will, it slammed me back into my reality on this plane. I awoke extremely terrified. I sat up in bed and said, "Oh my God, I made it back," and it was very traumatizing. I managed to put it off and just kind of go, well, that was real interesting, until I came across about a year later a book that very vividly described the same process. It showed a picture of a young man whose skull had been removed and the little light unit that they used to do it with, and the people floating out of their bodies above the beds.
Was that even more horrifying for you, knowing that it wasn't perhaps a dream? And
I was actually doing okay with it until I saw that book, and then it was like, oh my God, maybe there is some real objective something at play here. And since then, you know, I've done a lot of other research and stuff.
Has the research helped you in understanding it?
The research, I don't know anybody who's researched this phenomenon that hasn't ended up chasing their tail. There are so many models by which to look at this, but if nothing else, it's good to know that there's a whole lot of very credible and professional people that are putting a lot of energy and a lot of passion into trying to find out what's behind all of this.
We'll try and discuss that too a little bit later in the program. How do you deal with this? Because if you say what's happening to you has traumatized you, how do you go day by day living your life with this kind of a thing? Have you gone to see a therapist, or do you belong to a support group?
I have been to a couple of different support groups, and it's really comfortable to, comfortable is a funny word, but it's very interesting to sit in a room full of people that have had equally as disturbing and bizarre and sometimes just outrageous and funny experiences this way. Some people are very traumatized by it. Other people don't seem to have the wounded aspect of it and are actually more fascinated by it.
I want to take this opportunity too to thank you and Irene for being on the program. I know it can't be easy for you. I don't know how other people accept this idea and this program. We're open to ideas and to explore. We're not judging anybody, and we're not saying that we don't profess any philosophy, but at least we're keeping an open mind to this. How have you been received, and how do you feel about, either one of you can answer this, telling people about what's happened to you?
I kind of keep it under close wraps. I mean, obviously now, some of that is going to be gone. But what I know is that it was so comforting to me to find out that I was not insane. It was very comforting to me to be able to talk and talk and talk about what happened to me. It's like, it's like any kind of, whether it's incest recovery or coming back from a war or anything like that, the trauma is the same. And so to have the support groups, to have the ability to talk to people has made all the difference in the world. And so if I can, by putting myself out here a little bit and say, hey, this happened to me and I'm a relatively normal person, if somebody hears this and sees this and is able to feel comforted by the fact that they're not alone, then it's worth it.
We're going to talk about support groups, like I said, but I want to get to Jim now and talk about therapy and ask you, have you had any of your patients, I know you deal with drug and alcohol abuse and sexual abuse, but have you seen any people that, I don't know whether they came to you originally saying, I've been abducted, or they came to you for other problems and you discovered that this might have been the case?
The people that have come to me that had suspicions about being abducted all came presenting that as an issue. I haven't stumbled over someone with this type of problem, but I have worked with 6 or 7 people now who indicate that they have fears that they were abducted 1 or more times, and their stories are remarkably similar. The individuals are eminently sane with regards to their presentations, and quite articulate, quite intelligent. I think there might be one exception to that in all the people that I've seen. One individual was dishonest in a number of other ways, and perhaps it was a bogus experience for them. I'm basically operating in this theater as a therapist and hypnotherapist, attempting to help individuals both recall the abduction experience and to put it into some kind of perspective where they can heal and accept the experience and the trauma associated with it. With regards to, is it valid, is it true, is it genuine, that to me is not a concern. People are troubled by what they're getting and what they're experiencing, and I think that it's important that they find a way to deal with it and deal with it effectively.
Well, either you or Keith could answer some of these questions. Let's explore maybe some of the theories behind it. How do you know that the people that come to you aren't having just very vivid dreams that might be something from their childhood?
I don't know, and I've presented myself as someone who, for the most part, has maintained a studied ignorance of this phenomena, because I really want to be open to what happens, and I don't want to have any preconceived notions to direct people toward what I think an abduction should look like or what have you. So my experience has been pretty much to not read a lot of information about this phenomena and to stay
So you have no
ignorant, so I don't have any
yeah.
preconceived notions, and I'm not shaping what's happening.
Maybe Keith can answer this one. The recent article here in the parade, are they coming for us? Carl Sagan wrote an article, and if I understood it correctly, he suggested that people who claim to have had a UFO experience are actually hallucinating.
Right. Obviously, it's a matter of a debate, and my belief is that the alien presence is the best working hypothesis that we have right now. And actually, Carl Sagan is a debunker. He is not a true skeptic. And
What's the difference?
the debunker has made up his or her mind already. In fact, I shouldn't say this about my own sex, I suppose, but probably 99% of debunkers are male.
Can I ask you why that is?
Well, that's another topic.
Okay.
But Carl Sagan, the article, I believe, is damage control. The evidence is getting a little bit too strong. We're having too many books are being published by credible people and so forth. And the debunkers, of which I believe he is a consulting, he's not a member, but he's on the board of consultants of a debunking group called Psychop Center committee to scientifically investigate claims of the paranormal.
Do you believe the government's behind that?
No, I don't really. I think these people are honest in their intentions, but
But being a scientist doesn't seem
Yes.
rather closed-minded.
it does to me. It absolutely does to me. I think if you look at all the evidence and try not to close off any part of it, even though it's very bizarre from the scientific scholarly point of view, I think what you end up with is something is going on. And when you finally get that feeling, I think you're just being honest by continuing to investigate, and the debunkers don't do this. If you'll notice that, I believe probably that, I don't know, 80% of the people who looked at the article probably only read the pull quotes. The pull quotes, I don't know how much time you want to spend, but
Probably not a lot.
Okay. But what they did, the pull quotes are 1, 2, 3. What they did is set up an either-or situation. Is it real or is it hallucination? And then the next pull quote said, or words to the effect that the evidence is not good for the reality part of it. And then the last was it's probably an age-old phenomenon like demons or whatever, which obviously is not real. So it set up the conclusion right there. It's as I said, a damage control article, and notice it's in Parade magazine, what probably has the highest readership of all
And probably maybe a
magazines.
little conservative, would you say?
Yes, I believe so. I believe it has that reputation.
Some people who've written books and done some investigations come up with different theories besides the hallucination that Carl Sagan mentioned. There was one I read about that perhaps there is something happening, but maybe it's not UFOs. Maybe we've somehow, Irene, Steve, and some other people have tapped into a different dimension, a different time, life continuum, or something like that.
Right.
Either you or Shara might address that. Is that a plot? I mean, is that a possibility?
Well, actually, go ahead and jump in here, but what I believe is happening is that the UFO is a combination of evidence that can be interpreted in our ordinary Western reality and evidence that can't easily be interpreted. So it's this puzzling combination, and it's a mystery.
Like we're trying to understand it on our own narrow level of perception.
Yes.
I mean, it's hard to understand something that you can't see in reality.
That's right, and I think what's going to, or the best area of knowledge right now, which is being developed practically, as we speak, in the last 15 or so years, an area of transpersonal psychology. The theories being developed there have the possibility of eventually having an overall explanation of all the UFO phenomena, so it won't be so strange, so that the strange evidence will actually fit together and we'll have a global understanding. There's really, I think right now, kind of three parts to reality. There's the sort of the psychological part of reality. That's our feelings inside and that sort of thing, our perceptions and so forth. And then there's sort of the outside, the physical part, and science studies that. And what transpersonal psychology says is there's really an overarching reality behind all of that these two, the psychological and the physical, sort of fit into. And the UFO evidence, for example, the method of communication that we hear about from the stories again and again and again between alien presence and human beings is telepathy. Well, what's that? That doesn't fit the sort of the scientific scholarly paradigm.
Well, let's get to, we have two more people that have said that they were abducted, and they're going to join us in just a minute. That's Kay and John, and we want to hear their story. Let's start with Kay and see what she's got to say. We've also have some interesting visuals to show you in just a minute. As soon as we, okay, we're gonna get to Kay in just a minute, and then we'll talk a little bit about support groups and want to give our audience a chance to jump in. So, Kay, could you please briefly describe some of your UFO experiences, and then just let me know when you might want to talk about some of the wonderful drawings you brought along. You can just go ahead and start talking right now. Just give us a brief encounter of what happened.
Well, like Steve and Irene and many, many other abductees, my first conscious memory that something very unusual was happening in my life was at the age of 5, and it was a series of events that involved me being floated towards what I thought was God at the time. And God spoke to me with a mechanical voice, but it was telepathic. It was inside my head, and I could never remember what God was saying to me. These were very vivid memories, and as a child I came to know what to expect and when they were going to occur. And since I thought it was God, I thought, yes, God was somewhat unusual, but you know, he was the big guy, so you just kind of went along with it. And I basically lived a fairly normal life. Until I was 16, I had a sighting of 3 hamburger-shaped crafts, and the sighting lasted about 45 minutes, and I had a small telescope and was very, very sure of what I was seeing. And it kind of changed my life until I told some friends of mine at high school, and they laughed at me, and I didn't talk about it again for about 10 years.
Did you tell your family at all?
Yes, I did. My mother was with me during the sighting, and so were all of the children on our street. And unusually so, it was about midnight when this was occurring. And all of these children were children that I babysat for at the time. And I told my father and my sister, but they absolutely refused to believe that I was seeing anything and didn't even come outside. So I've had 4 sightings since then.
Any recently?
None recently, no. I would say my most recent sighting was in 1988, and that's pretty much where they were occurring in 1988, 1989, and I haven't had any recently. But the first sighting I had when I was 16 was very clear, and I'm 100% sure that what I saw were 3 UFOs.
You described them as, what was it,
They were hamburger-shaped. They were silver, illuminated from within. They had lights in the midsection that moved from left to right in a Doppler effect. The lights were yellow-white. It was very bright, a red and a blue. And there was just no doubt in my mind what I was seeing at the time. And just, I guess because of cultural taboos and the way my friends laughed at me, I was really embarrassed and just didn't want to talk about it.
You also probably feel a little uncomfortable today talking about the UFO phenomena, and might explain to our audience that's why we are talking with you anonymously. But I do appreciate you coming on this program. I'm sure you feel like Irene that you're here because you would like to help other people that have had this experience. Now, you brought some drawings along with you. When did you first start seeing the people that, I don't know if we can call them people, we brought that term up before. I don't know, what would you call them? I was talking, I think it was Irene calls them the Greys, or was it you that calls them the Greys, or one of you did. Anyway, when did you first start seeing the beings, and when did you first start drawing them? And perhaps we can see some of them and you could describe them to us.
My first conscious memory of a being is what I call them.
There's one of them. Could you describe?
Well, this is not my first conscious memory.
Oh, well, go ahead, and just as you see them, let's talk as you see them.
Well, this is what I call a tan being, about 6 feet tall. This is a female gray, also 5.5 to 6 feet tall.
How do you know it's a female?
Well, the picture doesn't show it, but she has breasts. This is a doctor, a tan doctor, and I'm not sure if he's totally alien or if he's not a hybrid, which...
He must have performed some operation, that's why you know he's a doctor?
Yes, he did. This is a 3 foot tall floating gray type being. This is the first being I saw in a conscious memory, what I call the blue being. And this is an infant that is from a very recent encounter. That's my pinky finger in its mouth because it wanted to suckle on something.
So, when you saw these beings, were they in your room or were you in one of their ships?
All of my memories occur outside of my house, normally in a ship or a craft of some type. Well, I shouldn't say all. Some of them have occurred on bases or locations that appear as bases, sometimes as military bases, and sometimes in underground bases. And this is something that is being reported more and more often in the abduction phenomenon in the literature. And I think over the next 5 or 10 years, you're going to hear a lot more about the military and the UFO phenomenon.
I just want to mention here briefly that about a year or so ago, you were very much involved in the UFO investigations. You went around and you talked once or twice, and you met Bud Hopkins. Anybody that knows about UFO research is familiar with Bud Hopkins and the books he wrote. You want to tell us just very briefly a little bit about some of the people in this field that are doing so much work?
Yes, my friendship with Bud Hopkins began in 1987, and he responded rather quickly to an Omni interview that I filled out, mailed to him because I didn't want anybody else to read it. And he telephoned me a couple of weeks later, and we set up a meeting, and he regressed me twice and put me in touch with the group in Pensacola, Florida, MUFON, Mutual UFO Network group. And I worked with a psychologist, Dr. Dan Overlade, in Pensacola, who was a MUFON consultant at the time. And I went through 7 months of regressive hypnosis sessions, but most of those sessions, we didn't find out a lot of, we found out some new information, but not a lot. I just remember so many of my encounters without the use of hypnosis.
Could you tell me briefly, are you encouraged with the work that the investigators are doing? Does it encourage you to know that they are looking into the phenomena, and do you feel that soon there might be a resolution?
Yes, it's very encouraging to see the work that Bud Hopkins has done over the years, and Dr. David Jacobs with Temple University, and thanks to Bud Hopkins, we now have John E. Mack, who's with the Cambridge Hospital, very famous psychiatrist, doing just wonderful, wonderful work. And there are numerous other very well qualified researchers and professionals looking into this, and I can personally tell you that they're saving people's lives.
Thank you very much, Kay. I would like to introduce John at this time. John also prefers to remain anonymous, and we appreciate that, and we're happy to have him on the program. I talked briefly with John a few days ago, and he relayed some of his stories to me, and told me that if he wasn't as emotionally strong as he is, he would probably have gone crazy. So let's hear what John has experienced and how he's dealing with those experiences. John, could you tell us briefly about some of the experiences you've had with the UFO phenomena?
My experiences started when I was a young child, very much like Irene. I remember the boogeyman, the monster under the bed, being terrified of whatever was at the foot of my bed. And I would have my mother check the room, check on the bed, leave the light on, so on and so forth. Then as the years went on, I would have these terrible, awful, what I thought were dreams. Totally draining. I would wake up in the morning and be exhausted. It would take me a couple days to get over these things. I wouldn't know what was going on. They were extremely realistic. I just didn't know what was going on. It was very disturbing to me. I would wake up with bruises and marks on my body, and again, not knowing what's going on, you think you're kind of on the edge. Approximately 4 years ago, I had a midday missing time episode of about an hour and 20 minutes, and that was extremely disturbing. I didn't know what happened to me, and I kept that inside for about 3 years. And obviously you really can't go up to your friends or family and say, I lost time and I don't know what happened to it. So I did see a program on television about abductions and missing time, and I thought that was quite interesting. And I attended a meeting, I think it was a NUFOG meeting, and I had met Kay through the meeting, and we got in touch with one another, and she has been invaluable to me. She's really helped me a lot. I know a lot about the subject now, and I have had a psychological test, and I'm perfectly sane. And it's kind of bittersweet information that I'm sane, but I know what's going on with the abductions and what happens to me. I've had some very positive experiences, and I've had some very terrifying experiences. It's something that I live with on a daily basis. My children are involved, which is very scary.
John,
So there's really nothing you can do. You just have to accept it.
John, thank you very much for telling your story. And one of the things you mentioned was losing time. I want to ask Jim, our psychotherapist, briefly if this missing time element, if that's typical with people that claim to have been abducted. Jim?
It certainly is. It's also typical of individuals who suffer from multiple personality and from other kinds of things too. And a lot of the symptoms that you will see that abductees manifest, some allusion was made to the same kinds of symptoms that people returning from wars or being sexually abused. Post-traumatic stress disorder is real common among abductees. And I think that's one of the things that has sparked my interest in the phenomena, because I've worked extensively over the last 10 to 15 years with survivors in sexual abuse situations. And some people suggest that this phenomena is a metaphor for sexual abuse rather than a pure occurrence in and of itself, a way that people symbolically manifest their sexual abuse symptoms.
As a professional, you don't see that though, do you?
I don't know. As I say, I think all the data isn't in. I think the important thing is that there are individuals who are experiencing difficulty as a consequence of these phenomena, and as you can see, that the people that are here tonight are very intelligent, articulate,
very sincere,
very capable people in their everyday life. They're not extremely dysfunctional. They're not.
They're functioning, I would say, quite well under the circumstances. I don't know if I would. I'd like to ask Shark briefly two questions. One is, Keith was addressing the factual part of the UFO. Now, you've been the Northwest Director for about 4 years now. Is that correct?
No, I've been the director for about a year and a half.
About a year and a half, but you've been involved with the group for a long time.
I have been.
And you've talked to many people, you've heard many stories. I don't imagine you have any conclusions, but you probably have some ideas. What are the people that claim to have been abducted or had UFO experiences, what do you think is going on, if you have any idea at all? Or
well, once again, I have opinions. I have personal opinions. I know this is a very good example of the kinds of stories that I hear on a very regular basis. And as a rule, people that tell me their stories and share their experiences with me are very sincere. They have absolutely no reason for making these stories up. These are people who sincerely are looking for help and are looking for an explanation for something that distresses them and frightens them at times, and other times can be very enlightening. A lot of people have experiences that they feel are wonderful experiences that somehow are spiritual in nature. So
for some people it's more of a positive, for others it can be either negative or positive.
It can be, and it can be both for the same person at times. Some people have some experiences that they feel are negative in nature, but then they have their positive experiences.
This is so fascinating. I've been hogging all the questions. I think in about a minute I'm going to give the studio audience a chance to answer some questions, so start thinking now, because we're going to come over there and ask you what questions you might have for any one of our guests. And don't forget Kay and John over there, you're welcome to ask them a question as well. While we're getting set up for the questions from our audience, we have one already. Are we ready to take questions? If we can take questions then. Okay, we'll get to you in a minute. We're just setting up for that. While we're setting up, and we're going to get our cameras ready so we can talk to our audience, I'll ask Shark quickly, tell me a little bit about NewFog, the support group.
Well, NewFog is not actually a support group. NewFog is an organization that meets once a month at Mount Hood Community College, and we present speakers that have anything to do with UFOs. We have...
You did have Bud Hopkins, I read.
We had... Bud Hopkins was here last May, I believe it was, and we had a very good group then. It was just after the Intruders program came out on the television. Right, and we have...
when will he be coming? I'm not sure when this program's going to air, but go ahead and give us a date.
They'll be coming March 28th.
Okay, I'm not sure if this... anybody further in the future? Because this will probably run sometime in April.
Well, we have different people that we are talking to. We're probably... Dr. Deerdorf will be talking about his books on the celestial teachings, which it has to do with the Billy Meyer incident. A lot of people who know things about UFOs are familiar with Billy Meyer, who has many photographs that he has shown of actual UFOs.
This is probably a good time to mention that we're going to give out your phone number,
Great.
UFO's phone number, and move on to the Mutual UFO Network. So we can go to our questions now, and we have our first audience participant who has a good question for us, I hope.
I was wondering, we've alluded to positive and negative experiences. I was wondering if John could describe what a positive experience was about, because all I've ever heard about is the negative.
Negative, okay.
The positive experience I had was a feeling of deep-seated love that the being at the time had given me, and it was indescribable. It lasted 3-4 days, and I was. It's a feeling that you would almost die for. It was fantastic. And
It took a while to find John, but he's there.
Right. I don't know how they did it, but I believe some of the entities, aliens, do have feelings, and some do not.
Okay, do we have it?
Did you want to know about the negative aspects or just the positive? I didn't.
Sure.
A negative situation would be when they are examining your body, and you're basically stripped on a table, and there are approximately 5 to 8 beings around the table, and they're doing different things, manipulating your body, probing your body, and that is, to say the least, extremely terrifying and just not a positive experience at all.
And that, I might add, is a very typical experience, too. We have another question from our audience.
Actually, I have a couple quick questions,
Great.
if I may.
Yes.
For anyone that would care to answer it who claims to have been abducted, I'd like to know if this is a situation that you feel like you have any control over, and whether or not you have any feeling of what the intention of those abducting might be.
Irene, you kind of flinched, although Steve raised his hand, too. Either one of you want to answer that?
Well, I submit that there is some, there seems to be some correlation between how much energy you're willing to give the phenomenon and how aware you are of it. I don't know whether that's just because it's something that you can go into denial about and comfortably pretend that this whole other universe isn't existing in your life. I mean, it's very odd to be living in this world here and then have a whole other world that's very difficult to share with anybody. As far as having control over it, I think, one of the main things that I know about my experiences is that for the most part, the most frightening part of the experience is your volition is sort of distorted. Your ability to manipulate yourself, even to move, to speak. A lot of these things are taken away, so a lot of the fear directly comes from a total lack of control.
And I would imagine it's hard for anyone like myself who's never had that experience to actually understand what you're talking about. You have to experience it yourself. It's
sort of like if you can imagine, if you can recall your first time in the dentist chair, and magnify that by 1,000 or something like that. Lots of foreign objects and shiny lights and things that you don't know what they are, an altered state of reality. Maybe he's using drugs on you or whatever, and it's very foreign and very, very terrifying. Since this may be my last chance to get something in, I just wanted to say that for those that are viewing this, that are experiencing these types of things, I would advise to sort of not invest too much energy in the literal aspects of it. It's important to address how it's affecting you emotionally, though I think it's also important not to invest too much in it as a literal type of phenomenon. In other words, lots of people are experiencing this. You're not alone, and
Steve, I'm glad you mentioned that, because for those who have experienced it and still are, we're going to give out some phone numbers. I believe I mentioned that again before, but I'll mention it again. So if they want to have their pencil and paper ready in about 10 minutes or so, I think we'll be wrapping up, and we'll give out those phone numbers. So if you'd like them, get your paper pencil ready. I think we do have another audience question, and then we'll let Jim's going to jump in and tell us something. Yes, please.
I'd like to ask Steve, do you feel that there may be a little detector that has been placed within you, that they could find you anywhere that you are, and that it seems as though your experiences were at nighttime? Have you had any daytime experiences away from your home?
Well, I have. I don't know how to translate my experiences into linear time. They almost are mutually exclusive. So as far as putting it in daytime and nighttime, I know that most of my experiences have happened seemingly during the night hours. I believe that, as far as little detectors and stuff go, I mean, there is a whole belief that many people are walking around with implants, with alien technology.
We've seen that in the media, haven't we, in movies and things? Maybe that's where we get those ideas.
Right, and in fact, a renowned researcher actually showed X-rays that, were anomalous enough that even the physicians were really baffled by what is this strange object inside this person's body. There wasn't really a good explanation for it. I don't know. I can't tell you whether that's me or not. I can tell you that that people that I've seen doing presentations have showed that we have technology that you could stick on the head of a pin, that you can trace virtually anything with. And, am I carrying that? I mean, who's to speculate? There's been times when I've been scared enough to be sure that it was. And
that's a good question, though, because, well, I'll ask it later. It seems that some people are targeted for whatever reason. We have another audience question I'd like to get to, and then maybe Jim can address that.
When I came tonight, I was not aware that you were going to be speaking about abductions. I thought it was just a show on UFOs, and I'm very intrigued with this because I've done studies of my own on this particular race, which I have come to know as Zeta Reticuli. And I'm just curious, there's been mention that there has been information and studies done over the last 15 years, and I was wondering if, of the four of you, you could put together maybe some more pieces of information that maybe you haven't spoken of that gives some idea more of what's going on. Is there anything that anyone has not said that could clarify a little more?
Any of the four of you?
Well,
Irene?
Last summer, I had a near-death experience. My kidneys went into critical infection overload, and happened to pick up, because it was around the house, Kenneth Ringer's latest book called The Omega Project, in which he postulates that where you go when you have a UFO experience or a near-death experience is the same place. And he calls this, I believe, the illusory world.
Imaginal
world, yeah. Not meaning that it's our imagination, but that it's another place.
Transpersonal world.
Right.
Different reality.
Different reality.
Yep.
Having had both experiences, I can say there's a lot of truth to that. And I'm stepping way out on a limb here. Another thing that he says in the book is that he believes that what this is all about is actually a cry from the universal consciousness because of what we're doing to the planet and what we're doing to each other.
That's very interesting.
And I can't say that I believe that. The truth is, I can't say I believe any of this. I've been in and out of denial hugely through my life, but that particular piece for me resonated with more truth than any other thing that I've come across.
I know Jim wanted to make a comment. I don't know if it's relevant to this, but I'm going to let him
I
make
think
it.
I can piggyback onto this in some way. I think one of the things that, well, the way to throw it out, I guess, is that in 1976, there were 28 reported cases of child sexual abuse in the state of Oregon. Last year, there were over 6,000. Now, that's because we've made it safe for kids to come forward and say, this is happening to me. And I hope that some of what's going on here tonight and what goes on in other groups like this around the country makes it safe for people who are experiencing these kinds of problems to come forward. And I think with the numbers, what will happen is what has happened in the area of child sexual abuse. We are learning a great deal about how to help people who have been sexually abducted and sexually victimized as a consequence of just the sheer numbers that are being studied at this point and worked with and helped to heal. And I think that it's extremely courageous for these individuals to come here tonight and to talk about what has happened in their lives. And I would hope that the people that view this recognize that courage, and those that have difficulty talking about these issues as they impact on their lives will come forward and share their experiences so we can learn what we need to learn in order to better understand what's going on and to help those individuals who are in distress as a consequence of it.
I think Kay wanted to make some comment in regards to the last studio audience question we had.
Yes, I wanted to make the comment that the particular race the man mentioned earlier, although I don't know where any of these beings are from, and I have had experiences with many, many different types of beings, I think, getting back to that question, they are very interested in genetics, our genetic makeup. They seem to be undergoing some kind of breeding program where hybrid babies are being created. They're also very interested in the psychological makeup of human beings, our belief systems, our emotions, even the Greys. There's been a lot said about the Greys not having emotions, but they do have emotions. They're very interested in us as people and what we feel and think. And I'd like to just make that comment because they're pretty much stereotyped as being non-feeling, negative, and bad, and that's really incorrect. It's a generalization. Many people have had positive experiences with the Greys, and I think that's really important.
Well, I think we're going to need another show because we only have a few minutes, and I have two quick questions, and then we have an audience question, but I just want to get to these really quickly. It seems that at different periods of time, there seems to be different hotspots in the world, perhaps Keith or Shar can answer this, where the UFO experience seems, I think it was 1952, there were like 200 a day here in the United States. I don't remember which part. Is Portland, is this Oregon becoming a hotspot, and is it true that different times there are different hotspots and there are different increases in UFO activity, or is it what Jim said, more people are reporting it, or can you address either one of those questions?
I think it's a combination of both. More people are coming forward and reporting it, but also the phenomenon does show waves of activity. There have been research projects that have tried to figure out ways of predicting this, but those haven't really been very successful. Oregon itself, I don't think, is becoming a hot spot, and there isn't a wave of activity right now in the last couple of years. It's just more and more people are coming forward with the abduction experience, though.
Looks like we have 2 minutes. I'll let, I have so many questions, but I won't be greedy. I'll let one of our audience members ask the last question, and we'll have to wrap this up really quickly because I do want to give out those phone numbers.
Keith, you talked about earlier about what we know in the public domain. I'm assuming there's a private domain. Stanton, I think it's Friedman, writes about a crash of a UFO and that they had beings that they found from the spacecraft, one of which they kept alive for a while and it eventually died. What do you know about this, and why do you think the government is not allowing the general public to know this kind of information?
Also, Keith, you've got about 30 seconds.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. But that's a good question.
That's a long story. If I hope this airs before March 28th, come here. Randall and Schmidt talk. They are the foremost UFO researchers on crashed flying saucers.
For our studio audience, at least they will know that.
Yeah.
That's very good. I wanted to ask you too about government involvement, and but I guess we don't have much time. But there just seemed to be some kind of a government cover-up.
Next show.
That's okay. Next show, government cover-up. Okay. I would like to thank my guests today, all 7 of them, for coming and being on my program, and my viewing audience. And I would like to thank you for watching the program, and we'll see you again.